resilience to tropical cyclones. It's under the Coruscant project that has been supported by the foundation BNP Paribas. So we have a huge team work on this. So from NASA, from different universities and regional partners as well. So just an introduction about the mangroves, the mangrove importance. So it has several ecosystem services that mangroves provide. So since climate regulation, so with carbon budget across the world, not only CO2, but also methane. It provides also, it is like a nursery for fishes. So it's very important, the relationship between health mangrove and reefs and all the marine ecosystems. So other things that are very important, so there are several things, but water filtration, so it cleans the water from effluents. And also another very important aspect that in the context of my work is the coastal protection. So mangroves, it's very important for protecting islands, mainly from storm surge, from flooding, from high wind speeds as well. As we have those in the tropical zones, we have so many hazards as, for example, tropical cyclones. So in this context, mangroves, the benefits of mangroves protection avert about 6 billion in flooding damage from tropical cyclones. The exposure and the resilience vary among countries. So we have so many countries that are much more vulnerable and less resilient to such hazards because of the population we have there, because of the natural landscape. So this exposure varies a lot between countries. And then mangroves has a role in a nature-based solution for protecting those population and economies. So the risk of tropical cyclones has been increasing. We have seen hurricanes with high frequencies and intensities, and actually the nature of those hurricanes has been changed as well. So they are closer to the coast, and they actually are bringing much more rain as well, and going also more northwards as well. So they are changed. And actually we have another problem in this context that is the compound events, so of the extreme events. So we have seen in the region, for example, severe drought in 2015 and 16, and in a mega hurricane season in 2017. And this duo has been for example, we have understood that broke like 13 times more mangrove mortality, because we don't know yet if this is the cause, but we assume that from the field that this happened. So we know from several studies from the past, since the 70s, 80s, that wind speed, rainfall, pre-cyclone, forest structure, and hydro-geomorphology are known to influence mangrove damage and recovery following cyclones in the North Atlantic Basin. And however, those studies have focused on site-specific response on individual cyclone events. So here we analyzed 25 years from 1996 to 2020 of mangrove vulnerability that we call the damage after a cyclone, and resilience that they recover after that disturbance. for the entire NAB, North Atlantic Basin, and its subregions using multi-annual remote sensing data. And we add here new underrepresented variables as human development, that's very important, and long-term climate trends as well. We also analyze our results for the region, but also for subregions, since risk assessments, adaptation frameworks can be developed in different scales, so in regional or country scale, so depends on. Here in the right, you can see, just to show a high resolution image showing like how mangrove get damaged after a cyclone. Yes.
Can you, I think you said it on the other slide, what is NAB again?
North Atlantic Basin. Okay. So yeah, first of all, to get the mangrove response for those cyclone impacts, we have used the mangrove extent from the Global Mangrove Watch 96. That's the first year of our analysis, it's the baseline. The impacted area has been accounted for the mangroves that are within 80 kilometers radius from the track of the tropical cyclone. Tropical cyclone you call from tropical storms that have a low wind speed to hurricanes from category 4, 5, that the maximum wind speeds. So the mangrove response was based on NDVI, that's a metric of, we could say, greenness, from harmonized Landsat 5, 7, 8 sensors. The vulnerability we have, for the vulnerability, we have analyzed the damage after that cyclone impact using a delta NDVI higher than minus 0.2. This is based on ground. It has been validated on the ground from previous studies. So we have, this is a good threshold for getting the damage measurement. So the accent is the NDVI mean value 2 years before the event, the hurricane season we are analyzing. And the expose is the NDVI of the hurricane season. So we think that we have like the hurricane season starts in August. Now it's starting earlier, like as last year, the first hurricane has been recorded in June 1st. So it's another new normal. But we have standard that from August to December. And the short-term resilience is the recover after damage. So it's the NDVI slope trend during the year after the disturbance. As you can see here from Tayel, he's one collaborator of our work. We can see in the bottom, like an undamaged case that we have, like we have the hurricane in gray in the middle, and we don't have a drop higher than minus 0.2 in NDVI. In the second case, we have this drop, so it happened, damage, but we see after that, in the year after, we see a positive trend showing that it is recovering. And in the last case, here in the bottom, we can see like, we would say like a short-term loss. So we don't see signals of recover or a short-term resilience, as we call here. So we have then done that from 96 to 2020 and make the union to work like in the way that we substitute time by space. And then we extract the pixel centroids for each one and randomly selected samples for the 4 classes that work here: damage, non-damage, recovered, and loss. We had about like 60,000 samples per class, something like that. So for assessing the drivers of that response, of those response, we have analyzed it like different environment variables. As I said, some ones that are very known, but others that have not been studied yet. So we have analyzed it, data from the year, or I would say the year of the damage, I would say from the hurricane season by itself. So year data from wind, rainy, hurricane season rainfall and dry season rainfall. It's important to know if like the previous condition, like a huge drought year would affect the response to, in the hurricane season. We have also analyzed it like climate data, we would say like long-term data for that, that pixel. So the tropical cyclone recurrence, the mean annual rainfall, those data are from the 80s. So we have this long-term data. The trend of the rainfall, the mean annual maximum temperature, trend maximum temperature, and trend of the drought index, the Palmer index. We have also analyzed the distance from human features. So you would say croplands, roads, and settlements. We also analyzed it like the previous conditions of the vegetation before that hurricane season. So what is the height of that standing? What is the canopy cover of that standing? So if there is a high green vegetation, fraction, soil, water, or water, and also the geomorphology and soil properties of the sites. So we have analyzed geomorphology in general. It's like typology settings, distance to shoreline using Euclidean distance, and the soil organic carbon at the places. So it's important to note. For sure.
Just like you keep following the logic. So what is the sort of ecological or environmental explanation for why distance to human interaction, so the 3 that you had in gray, would affect your recovery and resilience?
Yes, actually, mangroves are very dependent on the water flux and the water balance between salinity and fresh water. So because it is like in that interface between salt water and fresh water. And actually have also, so the quality of the water and the flux of the water are very important. So we could have, for example, some nutrients from croplands, but also change in the water flux, also some barriers there that could change. So settlements, not only chemical, but mechanical, has also a mechanical effect on the ecosystem health, you know? Yeah. So this is very important, actually. So for the previous condition of the vegetation, we have generated for this work. So we have worked with spectrometry analysis. So here we have generated, like we have collected more than 100 spectra using Google Earth Engine for Landsat 5 and Landsat 8, using, so from green vegetation, soil and water, and clouds as well, for that clouds that are missing from cloud masks. And we have used Viper tools to define end members, and then use them to and mix the images. And we have used like the 2 years before that cyclone event, that hurricane season that we are analyzing. We have used it as a like health condition of the stand, like if it has a greater green cover, we would say it's a richer environment, like it's a healthier stand. So we then analyze the correlation between those variables for both the data set that we work with damage and damage, and the other for recover and short-term loss. The first thing, so we start actually with more variables, but we only work with those 22 variables that has no high correlation between them. So we then apply the Hummel forest classification. It's a very good machine learning approach because it works like as a bootstrap regression when it finds patterns within subgroups of data. And this is great in this case, for example, because you can find these patterns in small settings across the region. And I guess a good model for that. So, and we access after that the variable importance, that is how that variable adds to the model accuracy at each tree. And then we have the importance of that across trees. So we have run that with 700 trees for each of the model. So we have the regional model and the sub-regional models for damage and for resilience and for recover. We also use a descriptive statistics and non-parametric statistical tests for analyzing on metrics. So let me go. So yeah, we have during this time, these 25 years, we have 368 cyclones reaching the area. And we can see here our sub-regions across the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, the North Atlantic Basin, as I said. We can see that we have areas with, this is based on the absolute area of mangroves. So areas that we have more mangrove, you will see probably more impact as well. So we can see that the areas that have more, the regions that have more impact are the southern Gulf of Mexico, then the greater Antilles, and followed by region and Bahamian regions, and then the Western Caribbean that we see there, like Cancun, those spots, please. So we can see, for example, an accumulate impact mangrove area for in this letter C, for example, for the southern Gulf of Mexico, of more than 4 billion hectares of impact during those 25 years. So here is just to show we have like aggregate the results in a 0.5 degrees Celsius. And we can see that the pathway of the cyclone, so the recurrence in the letter A there. So we can see like almost 14 cyclones reaching the Eastern Caribbean. So we see the pathway more in the eastern part, like close to the Atlantic. And there is also another pathway that goes through the Caribbean Sea and like reach this Mesoamerican region, and then goes northward to the North Gulf of Mexico. So the damage actually occur more, you can see the damage by impact occur more in the Greater Antilles, in the Bahamians and the Eastern Caribbean. So it's pretty much similar to the pathways. It's not pretty much, but it follows a pattern. But the loss is totally different. So the loss, we can see that has another pattern of spatial distribution, and we will discuss this with the drivers. So we can see a huge difference in the table between damage and recover. So we see that the damage, so that they are in general very adaptable, but they have some trouble to recover. And this vary a lot between subregions. As you can see, for example, the Bahamian present 30% of recover at least once, and while Floridian regions present close to 80% of recover at least once. So here are the results from the Random Forest and the importance of the variables. And you can see that in general, like the conditions of that hurricane season are very important to make them vulnerable, so to cause damage in general. But we can see that for some regions, as for example, the southern Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean, we have other variables playing a role in that response. For the Bahamian region, we can show that even though like the random forest doesn't show it, we saw, for example, that likely to be damaged as closer as it is from the 3 human variables that are used here. For example, for croplands, it's 4 times more prone to be damaged as closer as it is of the croplands, for example. And we see some patterns of relation of the vulnerability with human development also in the southern Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean as well. So in general, we can see that for in a regional scale that mangrove vulnerability increase where cyclones, wind speeds, and rainfall are higher, where the forests are taller, so the wind speeds can and do a mechanical force there. And also in lagunal settings, this is another find, like 60% of the damage are in lagunal settings. And this can be associated with a precondition of that settings. We don't know, like eutrophisation or tourism or whatever, but or actually some variations in terms of ponding there, so something like that. So when we analyze the resilience, the scenario changes. So we start to have more variables, more site-specific variables playing a role in the resilience. So we can see, for example, for all the regions and the regional model, we can see the human factors playing more role in the response. We can see the pre-cyclone condition of the vegetation playing a larger role. And we can see also the long-term climate trends playing a larger role, as in the regional context, as in the super-regional context as well.
Cibele, sorry,
yes.
That's super interesting. Can you help me understand why, if I'm looking at this correctly, saying that human infrastructure, I mean, habitat structure makes sense to me, geomorphology, but again, coming back to human infrastructure, when I read this, I'm seeing human infrastructure increases the resilience, or it just impacts the resilience?
It impacts, so depends,
Could be negative.
could be positive, could be negative.
Okay.
Yeah, depends on the way, but it play a role there.
It's a key variable in determining.
Yes, is a key variable. Yeah, but depends. Most of them show a negative impact because I can't put all the numbers here, but it's there. Okay. But most of them is a negative impact, but we can see both in both ways. In geomorphology as well, it's very important. So in the regional context, we can show like that the trend in drought is very important. So when you have a drought trend, we see more loss. When you have, we don't see a drought trend, we see recover. So this is, I believe it's one of the most key finds here. We see the same for trend in maximum temperature. So as higher, as hotter it gets, we see more loss. Canop high is same as the damage. So as higher the stand is, it get more damage, but it recover faster. So probably as we can see this for the green vegetation, for the soil cover, and for the soil organic carbon, we would say that where we have more resources, where we have a good condition, the mangrove is able to recover fast. So we can see, for example, for the soil organic carbon, it's not very different in terms of median values, but you can see, for example, that where we have low soil organic carbon, we have more loss than recover. So to conclude my thoughts here, so we saw in general a little vulnerability. They are highly adapted to the cyclones with only 15% of damage from the impacted areas. But in the other hand, they show low short-term resilience. So we see that almost half of them do not recover, do not show signs of recover in the year after the disturbance. So high damage impact ratios are most concentrated in the insular areas, along the most preferential pathway, as I said, in the eastern part, in the Atlantic part there, in the Eastern Caribbean, Bahamian, and a little bit of the Greater Antilles as well. But when we start to consider, think like the damage ratio in terms of an absolute value, like the Western Caribbean, that is, we have larger areas covered by mangroves, it starts to see also significant damage as well. So it's very important for policymaking because the selected metric is important to select the best areas for investment. You know, the characteristics of the cyclones mainly drive the vulnerability at the regional level, but the short-term resilience is largely driven by site-specific conditions. So it includes long-term climate conditions, as I said, drying trends in drier areas, as we saw in the southern Western Caribbean. The pre-cyclone habitat conditions, as I said, like the cover, the stand high, and the human interventions in the land. As I said, it can make chains that can be like mechanical chains, can be chemical chains that affect the health and the response of that mangrove to a cyclone. So subregions with minimum human interventions, as Florida, for example, we saw high there's resilience. We are not saying that's a causal thing, but it's something that we saw. And in the regions that we see a high human intervention in land and with other compound effects, we saw the lowest as the Bahamian. Bahamian is the most, we would say, problematic region in terms of mangrove health. So the Bahamian and Greater Antilles are the subregions where human intervention for mangrove restoration is needed the most, followed by Yucatan, that's the Mexico region there. So we have seen a massive coastal tourism development in the last seven years that increased the exposure of and vulnerability of coastal communities to these extreme events and act as an amplifier of hurricane risks. Living shorelines, we would say, mangrove, reefs, seagrasses, coastal marshes provide more effective protection against cyclones than gray infrastructure, you would say. We have studies showing that. So it better facilitate post-disturbance recovery than hard shorelines. We are saying in terms of population and economy resilience, not exactly ecosystem resilience. So we are showing that all of them are integrated. So it's very important to take account for nature-based solutions in the region, placing ecosystem health and not only human safety as part of regional risk reduction strategies in a urgent task in the region. For like mangrove and social resilience in the region are predicted to worsen. So we have seen the increase in terms of frequency and intensity of hurricanes, as I said, and nature of them are changing as well. But we have from the literature that mangrove recover time circa of about 20 years. And the economic recovery is about 30 years in some islands. So if the hurricane starts to get more intense and more frequent with this time for recovery, things must change. So as I said, we are seeing also compound effects in the region. So from different extreme events, and as I said, drought years plus hurricanes, it like make things worse. And since climate hazards are externally driven, managers will need to focus on minimizing human drivers that we saw that play a role as well on the mangrove response to the extreme events. So thank you very much for your attention. So I'd like to thank all the partners of this project. So the regional partners have helped a lot us to discuss our results as well. And the foundation BNP Paribas that has been supported this project, Coastal Biodiversity Resilience to Increasing Extreme Events in Central America. Thank you very much.
Any questions in the room?
I was curious about the temperature trend variable, which seemed like it was pretty important in the.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you guys.
Yeah, actually, we have just taken a look on that, but we are seeing like across the world that hotter temperatures, the world's becoming hotter and drier. So we are seeing, for example, in Brazil, in Amazon, Pantanal, for example, other wetlands, that they are playing a role in forest health, so in degradation. So I believe this is a pattern that happened like in all ecosystems, at least the tropical ones that I know a little bit more. So, but yeah, we just saw that yet. We have not explored it more, but it's there.
So a lot of what we do, like at Earth Lab, we have a lot of different kinds of disturbance ecologists. So you focused on hurricane disturbance, we have fire disturbance, we have invasive disturbance. And I guess I'm wondering how you could see maybe some overlap or transition of methodologies between your assessment of recovery and resilience in the hurricane context to maybe some other disturbances, or if there is any. And this is kind of a discussion, like maybe Chelsea, you could jump in here, of like these things.
Yes, like you're saying, like applying what you are doing here, there, or what I have been done there, here. Like,
Yeah, just these concepts of recovery and resilience and what they mean and what the drivers of them are, because I feel like that's kind of where the question is with climate change. And
yes, so I saw lots of intersections between them. One of them is, for example, I missed there like some pre-processing in the data in terms of resampling and spatial outcorrelation. So some things that we are developing here and would improve a lot. For example, my methodology. So this is something I see. I see here that we have like grab a lot of data, different things. So this is a way that we can start apply. So they are all available in the internet. You must just do some pre-processing to have like the trends, the mean, but yeah, they are freely available data. And yes, so yeah, vegetation responds to the whole things is a environmental, is from the geology, because everything is interacting. So I believe we can if you want to understand the relationship, for example, between your vegetation and climate trends, for example, it's important also to account for the soil properties for the geology we have there, because all of them make micro environments and macro environments that play a role. So I see in this way, like understand the ecosystem in general, for example, is something that I can bring from here. Another thing, and actually species as well. So yeah, we have also invasive species in mangroves as well. And as they change, for example, we have now, for example, some ghost mangroves in Everglades, for example.
Ghost?
Yeah, they actually do not recover anymore. So they have just like that stance. And it's a way for invasive species get there.
What are they replaced by?
For now, nothing. But you see in the next, I know some ones that have been working with invasive species there, but I have not studied yet, like what's the process that goes there.
Mangrove look like?
So in general,
Like
yeah, no, how they look like, yeah, just like usually, yeah, just that trees, like we have just the trunks with no, we have some signings of some saplings from like Rhizophora is one species that recover well in terms of saplings. But yeah, it's a very unique ecosystem. So we have different species adapted to the different zones parallel to the shoreline. And so each one has a very specific trait to deal with that environment. So that's why, even though they are very adaptable, they are in a harsh environment there. If some change, very strong change happen there, it could be a disaster, as we are seeing now. like, for
And
example.
that kind of makes sense why you use NDVI, because that seems very characteristic. I mean, it's like blue
Yeah,
or NDVI, whereas like on land for invasives, that's a much harder signal for you to understand what that means.
Phenology or something.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not a fan of NDVI. I'm much more a fan of EVI than NDVI for tropical ecosystems, for example, because as mangroves, for example, because NDVI used to saturate in high biomass. So it must, you need to have a huge range between non-forest to forest for it to work very well. I'm pretty much more like, I like more EVI, for example, but in this case, we use it in EVI. But more than that, spectrum history analysis, that we can like extract the effect of the shade from your green vegetation fraction, I believe is the best way to go from my point of view. That's why I have used it in the second step. And we are going to use here as well for microsystems. Yeah, please.
Were you able to differentiate then what damage was from? Or do you damage so much more that invasive species wouldn't? You know, both those things are happening at the same time somewhere.
Yeah, I have not studied the impact on invasive species, but I know there are some groups studying that. Yeah, in the South US. But I have not studied the invasive species. I'm actually working now on mapping the species there. So this is another intersection. So to see a long time how they change in terms of functionality there, because we have like three dominant species in mangroves. So it's pretty easy to associate like taxonomical with functional diversity. So I'm going to work on that as well, but not exactly invasive yet, but something to think about. Let's think about it.
Incredible, both for mangroves and for other systems, would be like bringing in, I know you had soil organic carbon, but also thinking about like nitrogen and phosphorus and how those are limiting regrowth after disturbance. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that, especially after multiple disturbances, that you get increasingly limited by one or the other, depending on if it's temperate or tropical or whatever.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's for sure. I have seen two studies that one showing the bad side of enrichment, but the other one, hurricanes bringing fertility for mangroves. So
We get a global imaging spectrometer in space.
yeah, it's a good topic for sure.
On that note, like just a seed for people if they are interested in this topic, NASA had a field campaign called Delta X, where they flew imaging spectrometers to look at erosion, and it was all looking at the Mississippi Delta mouth, but they also flew imaging spectrometers that can pick up on nitrogen and phosphorus. So,
But in the canopy.
yeah, it's in the canopy.
Yeah. We need soil layers.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there's been a lot of studies that have shown that what's in the soil propagates to the canopy. It's a correlative,
Yeah.
not one for one, but yeah, there's been studies that have shown the correlation.
Trees and vegetation in general, though, get really good at like compensating for what they're lacking.
Yeah.
So they are able to like resorb nutrients and don't shed as much of what they're limited by. So yeah.
To a degree.
I like this idea though.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Cibele. It was really
Thank
interesting to see this. Thanks for presenting.
Thank you very much. Yeah.